Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Mindy McAllister, and I'm the Education and Outreach Specialist at the Palouse Conservation District. Tonight, I'm joined by my colleague Allison, who will be monitoring the chat and coordinating some behind the scenes stuff this evening, as well as our presenter, Ms. Melissa MacKelvie, who we'll be hearing from soon. We are very excited to bring you this presentation tonight, and we're looking forward to spending the next hour here with you. This talk is being recorded and will be posted on our website and YouTube by next week. Before we get started, please let us know in the chat where you're joining us from tonight. For those who may not be familiar with us, the Palouse Conservation District is a local government agency based in Pullman, Washington. We engage with landowners on a voluntary basis to keep our air, water, soil, and habitats healthy. We're one of 4 conservation districts located in Whitman County. We have 23 staff, 1 AmeriCorps member, 1 Veterans Conservation Corps member, 1 undergraduate intern, and we are led by a 5-member volunteer board. Our mission is to foster the voluntary conservation of natural resources by providing the tools, education, technical expertise, and financial assistance to support our local community. For the remainder of the presentation, I'd like to ask you to please keep your microphone muted. I encourage you to keep your camera on if you're comfortable doing so. However, if you run into any bandwidth issues, I do recommend you turn your camera off at that time. That can typically help quite a bit. The camera and microphone controls can be found on the bottom left of your screen if you're not familiar with Zoom. If you have any questions during the presentation, you're welcome to drop them into the chat at any time, and we'll go through them with our presenter at the end. Before we begin, I want to tell you about a few upcoming events and opportunities as well, including information on our spring tree sale. If you're interested in planting native trees and shrubs on your property next spring, be sure to go ahead and check out our tree sale. It is live on our website now. It sounds really funny to plan this far ahead, but we have dozens of species available for pre-order, including many species that help improve landscape resiliency and habitat. Please be sure to place your order soon because some species will sell out. The link to our online store is getting dropped in the chat for you, so you can navigate to that if you're interested. We also have, coming up quickly next week, our next soil health breakfast, which is on Thursday, December 12th from 7 to 9 a.m. at the Center in Colfax. That's a facility attached to the library on Main Street in Colfax. We invite producers to enjoy coffee and breakfast as you learn about the soil health practices that your fellow producers are implementing on their operations. The event is really intended to be a peer-to-peer learning opportunity for local farmers and ranchers. We also will hear from Kurt Braunwart from ProGene about winter pulse crops. Registration is required for this one, and by next Monday would be great so that we can plan for food. The link for additional information and registration is getting dropped into the chat now. Also coming up, we have the Palouse Conservation District annual meeting, and we would absolutely welcome any of our local folks to attend. We will be celebrating conservation highlights from 2024 and our plans for helping our community meet conservation goals in the next year, so our 2025 cycle. Attendees can network with staff, learn more about district programs and services. The annual meeting will be held Tuesday, January 28th from 5:30 to 8 p.m. at the Uniontown Community Center. Dinner is provided with special thanks to our sponsors, and door prizes will be raffled off throughout the evening. So if nothing else, join us for dinner and door prizes. In addition, registered voters who reside within our conservation district boundary are eligible to vote for a board seat on the Palouse Conservation District Board of Supervisors at the annual meeting. If you're unsure what district you reside in, if you'd like to find that out, or if you'd like to get registered for this event, you can follow the link that Allison is dropping in the chat now. also coming up in January, and we are waiting on some final details, but we did want to go ahead and share the date and topic for our January Conservation Talk series. We will convene again on Thursday, January 16th at 6 p.m. for a presentation focusing on salmon on the Palouse and downstream efforts from here. Please watch our social media, our newsletter, or our website for finalized speaker information and registration details. With that, I am very excited to introduce our presenter for this evening. Melissa MacKelvie is a habitat biologist for the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, covering Lincoln and Whitman counties. She grew up in Eastern Washington and graduated from the University of Washington with a degree in environmental studies and received a graduate certificate in wildlife management from Oregon State University. She has worn a few different hats over the years, including managing a thoroughbred horse farm when she was fresh out of college, assisting with agricultural soil research, and working for the City of Spokane's outdoor recreation program. She has worked for the Department of Fish and Wildlife for 5 years and enjoys sharing her interest in science and the arid ecosystems of Eastern Washington, especially our shrub steppe. In her free time, you can find her reading, gardening, or hitting the trails, mountain biking, skiing, or hiking with her husband and their senior dog, Hank. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and hand off to Melissa.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mindy. Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here, and hopefully this will shed some light, or maybe just bring up some new questions for you guys about beavers, especially in the Palouse area. I also wanted to mention that, with some of these, if you have questions and specific issues that you guys are facing on your properties, feel free to reach out to me either by email. I'm sure Mindy will share my contact information at the end. I will also be at the dinner. So the Palouse CD dinner, as long as it doesn't throw down snow or something, I'm planning on being there in Uniontown. So you can always come up and meet me in person at that event as well. So now let me manage my multiple screens that I have on here. Okay. And then let's see. Share. And this is always the fun part. Thank you for your patience. All right. Can you let's see. Looks
Go
like
ahead and flip those.
all right. There we
Perfect.
go. All right. So yeah, Mindy did a great introduction for me. So we're talking a little bit today about beavers, rivers, and living with wildlife. So let me move one more thing here. So when I was creating this presentation, one of the things I wanted to start with was just some of the beavers that we've seen in popular media, right? When I was growing up, there was a show called The Angry Beavers. That was a big cartoon, open season, Lady and the Tramp. There was a really popular documentary that I think it was National Geographic came out with that I remember seeing in the IMAX when I was a kid. And so beavers, they've been featured in a lot of movies, a lot of shows as mascots with Oregon State University, and they continue to captivate us to this day. We associate them with being industrious, hardworking, and there's even personality descriptions based on the idea of the beaver. So, in reality, and as some of you guys may have experienced, our relationship with them is much more complicated. In this presentation, I hope to shed some light on both why we run into issues with beaver, their importance in the habitat as engineers, and ways that we can prevent and manage conflict. So this video is from a game camera I set up, actually, that some of you may know if you live in Pullman. This is over by the airport road there, that the city was dealing with some pretty active beavers that were chewing down trees. And so I set up some game cams just to get some footage. And um, you can see here they are, they're nocturnal, right? Building their dam. So they're driven by the sound of water. So when we make a notch in a dam, or something falls in their dam, they're driven by that sound of moving water, and that's what drives them to fix it. So that's usually why, when while removing dams can be really helpful in flood management, they're usually considered only a temporary solution, because the beaver are very active and will go and rebuild. So um, that's that's a little bit. So just a brief introduction in the Pullman area. Um, so you may kind of wonder why I'm going to go over this history, and I promise I'm going to loop it all together at the end. So as you may know and have heard about when you were in grade school, right? The fur trade drove a large demand for pelts, for especially for beaver pelts. It's estimated that pre-colonization North America had anywhere between, conservatively, 60 million beaver to they think it's closer to 400 million. But unregulated trapping caused a large decline in population during the 1800s. Politics also played a part in this. So the Hudson's Bay Company's fur desert policy, oops, I'm sorry, um, encouraged eradication of beaver to keep Americans from moving west, right? So beaver were almost like gold. They were worth so much, and their demand was so high, especially for hats. Their pelts repelled water. Um, that by the 1800s, people actually started to theorize that beavers were going to be extinct. So by 1909, beavers were added to Washington's game code. So people could be fined between $50 to $100 per beaver found in anyone's possession. And but then as their sorry, trying to figure out my, there we go, my mouse. Um, But as pelts became more difficult to obtain and they dropped out of fashion, populations rebounded. And so that's where we start finding, right, that people had issues with beavers causing flooding their property. And the Washington state legislature actually passed an act in 1945 requiring Washington's game department to come up with a code to manage the beaver population. So at the same time, um, we've been modifying waterways, both in Washington and then since the beginning of time, since human beings have been around, right? We've modified our waterways. This is a specific example that I'm sure many of you drive past quite frequently. So these photos are from the Washington Rural Heritage Project, which, if you ever have time, go check them out. They have a lot of amazing photos. These are examples of the floods that Colfax used to see due to the Palouse River flooding, rain on snow events. And so, that's one of the reasons, right, that we modify waterways. We also do it for transportation, commerce, increased land use, specifically agriculture is what we see a lot in Whitman County, recreation, and urban development. So enough times, a place floods, right? And we go, okay, well, how do we fix this? Or how do we attempt to fix this? And so back in the 1960s, there was a flood control project, and this is very different than what we would do today, right? But here they are working actually in the Palouse River here. So here they are, getting ready to lay concrete. And this is what you see today when you drive through Colfax. You see this cemented in river. And so you can see, I don't know if you guys can see probably not see my mouse, but there's actually, you can see the river had been pushed to one side. And so it's really interesting just to see how in such a short amount of time, how, we've changed how we manage rivers in a lot of ways. but we're still dealing with the impacts today. So another photo, right? This is a 1935 photo from a incised stream from NCRS. And what's really interesting, so this stream was dredged, straightened, right, to make room for cropland. And that was something that both, was pushed during the Great Depression and also during World War II to feed the troops. And you can see right below there's this rock dam that they built up to try to prevent incising, which is where the stream is actually dropping down because of the straightening and the force of the water. So they built up this rock dam to try to catch sediment and build it back up and stop it from incising. So this is something that we've been dealing with for decades, right? So this isn't new to just today. This is something we've been dealing with for a long time. So again, can river engineering cause problems? So these photos, this is from the Duwamish, not anywhere close to here, but it's been really, heavily studied. So I wanted to use this as an example. You can see this is from the Burke Museum, what they estimate the river, the Duwamish, used to look like, and then post-industrialization. And I like to go through when I do these presentations, I like to go through this not as a this is what was, what happened, it's bad. It's just it is what it is. And now we manage for that, right? And sometimes that means in certain areas we can restore it. Sometimes it means that we're just managing for how it was historically built up. Um, so river engineering, such as straightening, concrete lining, can cause the water to flow faster through the hydraulic system. To think about it simply, straight streams move water faster, while when you have meanders and streams with bends and curves, it tends to slow water down. So this is important because streams and rivers can become incised, which means that they drop down, they have a tendency to cut through, right? They disconnect from their floodplain. And if you think back on that photo from 1935, that rock dam, again, was installed to try to prevent that from happening and to accumulate sediment. So you may wonder, what does this have all to do with beavers? Well, um, yeah, it has. I really like this graphic because it can show what beavers can do in systems and why we call them nature's engineers, right? So so they build the dams, as you can see in slide A, or in part A, right? Build the dams in an incised stream, and the stream starts to meander. So the incised channel starts to accumulate some more sediment. But note also, if you can kind of see at the bottom of these little diagrams there, the water table. There's a little blue line. That's the water table. That's supposed to denote the water table. So as the stream meanders, right, the beavers tend to build out their dams, right, which causes the stream to meander more. And so the system starts to respond, and it starts to what we call a grade. So it increases the deposition of sediment, and the water table, we see the water table start to rise. So it slows the water down for longer, allowing it to saturate the surrounding area and actually builds that water table up. This is really important for salmon species. It can, especially, well, in all of our native species, it can lower the water temperature and add habitat complexity for fish and other riparian species. So there we go. We can see that it's a grading, and there's where the water table rises. So another kind of fun little diagram shows this and how it's important for also for wildfire and drought impacts, right? So when you have a really narrow stream channel, it's moving water really fast, it drains really fast, and then it's dry. When we have a more extensive groundwater, you have more green vegetation that is able to provide a buffer in these extreme drought situations. So we also we as humans have noticed that that what beavers do, and the CDs do this a lot as well. So I work a lot with the conservation districts on these projects that they have with landowners, and we actually will mimic beavers. So here's an example of a BDA, a beaver dam analog. There's also something called post-assisted log structures, which mimic large woody debris accumulation. But basically, what they do is they drive these posts. This is very simply drive these posts in and can weave debris in, plant willows in there to take hold, and then accumulate. And then it starts accumulating sediment. This is a really cool site that I got to go out to in the Methau area, where they've had a lot of really severe wildfires out there that have knocked out all the vegetation. And you can't relocate beavers or have beavers move back in, right, if there's not enough vegetation for them. And so this is one of the ways that the Methau Beaver Project is working on restoring those areas after those extreme wildfires. And so I think this was put in maybe like a year or two before this picture was. And just the amount of sediment that started accumulating behind that in such a short amount of time is just incredible. It's really cool to see. And so that really helps green up the area, trap that sediment so that other plant species can take hold there after that fire. So, like many of you are probably here to learn about, so when does conflict occur? So conflict occurs, dams, lodges, chewed trees, all of it, right? Damaged trees can cause safety hazards, especially when they're near roads. Dams can cause flooding. So while beavers are essential to how our ecosystems function, we also have to balance that on the impacts that they can have on local infrastructure. And that's part of my job and what I do. That's a section of what I do. So dams can be removed, but they require what's called a hydraulic project approval because we're working in the streams, and that's what I work with people on to try to find the best solution there for these challenges. Um, so the two of those photos aren't mine; those are from just from our uh, agency portfolio of photos. The one on the left is from the site that I went out to. That was in Pullman, where those trees were, the city was concerned that the trees were going to fall down and cause a safety hazard because they were so close to the road. And so we were trying to figure out, kind of like best methods of how to treat that. Another fun video just to break it up. See if you guys can see the beaver moving up. So in absence of wood, they'll use mud, and that's what this little guy is doing, using mud and reed canary grass. And so they'll actually use whatever they have available. And I've seen them use, yeah, I mean, just straight grass to build dams. It's pretty amazing. So, but there he is kind of patching up his lodge there, or her. Um, so beavers can also damage restoration plantings, especially when it's their preferred tree species, right? So you have the aspen, the cottonwood, the willows. I've seen large restoration plantings wiped out, which is really unfortunate because a lot of time and a lot of effort will go into these restoration plantings just to have beavers just pluck them all out. Um, wire wrapping can be an effective deterrent, but you really want to make sure that there's room for the tree or the plant to grow. You want it tight enough that the beaver can't slip up in through there, but not so tight that it limits growth. There's also a couple different options of like taste and odor repellents and a sand or latex paint mixture that you can that can be applied to the plantings. I've seen in some situations in some mitigation areas, there's where they'll uh, take panels and just protect like the whole planting area. So it depends on what your capacity is, what your finances are. I've seen there's wire, electric wire that people put low enough that the beavers get shocked. But it keeps them out of those plantings until they're established enough that they can handle having, some portions removed. Like willows, cottonwoods, they'll spring back up once they're to a certain maturity. But it's those new sap these or those new plantings that are really tasty to the beaver and then can be kind of a bummer for people doing mitigation. So again, here's some more extreme events of beaver floods, right? Blocking roads, which I've gone out to some of those as well. Thankfully, I've never had anyone's house be in danger as far as flooding out, but there's just that's some of the effects that, while I'm like, oh, beaver are amazing ecosystem restorers and are really integral to that. We also have to balance the need for, making sure people's property and lives are protected as well. So here's another example of something that you can install for if you have a dam and you're concerned about flooding. And my next slide, I'll show some photos where this actually occurred. I worked with another conservation district in Whitman County, Pine Creek, over in Oaksdale, and they installed one because they were running into floods. So I worked with Casey and a local nonprofit. We were able, they installed them and it was has been working really well. I checked it last winter and it's still going. That was like 2 years ago. So beaver deceivers, there's the dam there that you then have some piping, some like culvert pipe that you can install into the dam, and then you put some hog paneling around them, some wires around it to block the intake. So large enough that fish can pass, but not so large that the beaver can get through. But then that prevents them hopefully from blocking it. You also can what we do is kind of score the downstream end of the pipe so that they don't know where the water's coming out of, right? So they're driven by sound. So that's another big part of it, right? Is that they can't patch it up because they will try to go patch it up. If you were to just put a pipe straight into a dam, they're going to find a way to patch it up. So this this next these next pictures are from that Oaksdale project. So we have that culvert piping, the hog rings to tie it together, and the concrete blocks to kind of hold the pipe down. One of the biggest things that I tell people, so when I have like emergency concerns where someone goes, this beaver dam, the beaver came in, built it, and then we had this flood. I didn't realize the water was going to get so high, and we had a flood event. Is when we always say, okay, don't take the dam down too low because that's how the beaver know to patch it up, right? So if we remove the dam completely, then they're just going to go build a dam someplace else. But if we do what's called notching it and take down a section and then put that pipe in that section, then they're going to actually patch up over that. And so you can see the people from the Lands Council in that photo to your left. They're putting, this is done in the summer during low flows, and they were putting that pipe in and then putting debris on top of it. So, woody debris on top of it. And then the beaver went in and kind of patched it up and started taking it on over themselves. And yeah, it's still working. So the one caveat that I always tell people is that you really want to have someone. So when you're installing these for the first time, to help you out. So the Lands Council, this nonprofit out of Spokane, they're really knowledgeable. They do a bunch of these and are really helpful. They work with the local conservation districts a lot. And we actually got some funding. I was able to get some funding to purchase supplies. So the Lands Council will go and install these. If there's a landowner that's like, hey, I like beaver, but I'm at my wit's end. Can we do something? We can work with them and have some supplies for the installation. And so usually the Lands Council and whichever Whitman County Conservation District will work with me to get those supplies and get the permit and get that kind of going. And then they actually monitor for it to make sure that, if it washes out, that they can reinstall it. But a lot of times it actually does not wash out. Like most of them, especially Adam, who installs them, he's really knowledgeable about this, and so he's usually pretty good at being like, I think this one's old enough and stable enough of a dam to hold on, and so we kind of evaluate the site. So it's always good to have someone who's seen a bunch of those come out and look at the site first before just kind of plopping one in there. So, and then you don't also have to deal with the permitting, which I know can be um, a lot. Um, so another kind of method of managing conflict is relocation. This one's a little more, so we're trying to figure this one out, especially in Whitman County. You'd think it would just be as easy as, right, like grabbing some beaver and just dropping them off someplace, but there's actually a lot that goes into this. So these photos are again, from some training that I did in the Methow Beaver project. So this is on the left there, it's actually an old hatchery raceway. So where they used to raise fish there, and it's for with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife. So not our state agency, but the U.S. the feds, and they're able to kind of compartmentalize those raceways and put little beaver huts into them. So when they have a landowner that's like, listen, I really can't have this beaver in there, they go and trap them, take them to this facility where they can monitor them, and then find a good option for relocation. And so they have this whole system kind of set up. Um, the challenge that we have to look for, especially in the Palouse area, is disease. So we're limited by several factors when it comes to relocation. So we usually relocate based on watershed, and that's to minimize disease. So beaver can carry disease like any wild animal. And some of the things they can carry aren't even, it may be impactful to mammals, but they can carry, things on their fur that can impact the water system and can have an effect on frogs or have an effect on fish. And so we really want to be aware of that disease transfer. And so when anytime we're looking at relocating beaver, we're working with our veterinarian, and we're also working with the people who have been certified to relocate them. So we're also looking at the suitability of the location. So beavers need foraging material, like I was mentioning in that last slide. At the Methow Beaver project in that burn area, if we were to just drop the beaver back in there, there's not enough food for them at that point. They need like those slow moving waters, anything too fast, they're just going to move on. They're not going to try to build a dam over like rapids, right? And so that suitability is a big, that habitat suitability is a big factor as well. So if the site's degraded, they're usually just going to move on, or they die. Unfortunately, they can starve to death. Or they become a snack, right? If there's no places that they can build a lodge, no places that they will also sometimes burrow into the banks. There's nothing that they can really do that in, right? It's not good habitat for them. We also are really dependent on the volunteers and staff who are able to relocate them. It's a little bit past like the capacity that we can do like as habitat biologists. But I know that there's some nonprofits and then some for-profit companies that will do relocations. It just is a little bit more of a process than maybe people think. You also, of course, want to make sure the neighboring landowners agree with you wanting to relocate, because it can become, there's some tension that can become if someone's like, oh yeah, drop this next to, my neighbor won't mind, and then it builds a dam on their property, and they're like, what happened? So there's a lot of evaluation that goes into relocation. But it is an option, and that's something that I'm hoping that I can kind of work on here in the Palouse area. I think that'd be really cool. So um, this is just a fun little clipping. I'm sure you've probably heard about the relocation efforts. So again, when beaver were almost extirpated, which means that not extinct completely from the planet, but right, almost removed from this area. Um, People tried to relocate the or like, you know, install them into national forest wherever they could. So here's an example from Idaho of they actually relocated 76 beavers into the Frank Church Wilderness. And what's amazing, so they would drop them out of planes using old parachutes and supplies from World War II. And what's amazing is that only one died. So out of 76, one died from chewing through the harness. But the rest survived. And so there was a whole process. They would also use horses. So they would also put kits and beavers into packs and then take the into like the horse packs and then take them into wilderness areas. So there's some pretty interesting, it may not be something we would do today, but that's how they kind of approached it back then. So I always like to throw that in there because some people really know about it and some people don't. So it's always a really interesting one. So and then, this is again, I have to kind of look at things and try to be impartial, right? So trapping is also an option, lethal removal. So that is something I don't necessarily deal with a lot. That's more of my counterpart, Regan. She's our conflict specialist, and she can help with trapping. Looking at wildlife control officers. There's also for trapping, regulations as far as like season dates where people can still go and trap. That's still you need a license, but that's still something that people do. And so that's always an option for people as well. Sometimes they get to their limits and they're ready to trap, and so that's an option as well. So I always like to have this slide in there just for people's awareness. But that's not my side of things. That would be more of our conflict staff, and I'm happy to connect people with her as well. So, and then I have just some of my notes, and I'm happy to provide you guys with, if you want to do some deep dives, get into it more. I'm happy to go through that. I'm happy to answer questions about all these processes. I will stop sharing. I think sometimes what's really nice about these presentations, especially, is the opportunity to like have a conversation. And so, slides, there's only so many slides people probably want to see of me talking about beavers and history of the Palouse. Maybe you're a big nerd like me and you really like it. We can talk all day about it. But I think there's something that's really big about just being able to have a conversation and talk about like what I've experienced, what I've heard about, that type of thing. So yeah, happy to answer questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Melissa. We
Yeah.
really appreciate the information and the expertise.